Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple.
Manchester United were triumphant 2-0 winners at Old Trafford, thanks to Fernandes and Fred. But while Ten Hag's men were dangerous in attack, they were also dominant in defence, thanks to Ten Hag's tactics. But what exactly did Spurs look to do in possession, and how did Ten Hag look to counter this? Let's take a look. And guys, to take your enjoyment of every match up a level, join me on Spitch, which is my fantasy football app of choice that you can get for free through the link below. And Spitch has so much more than just the weekly mode. You can also join the season mode if you want to test your skills over the long haul. You can play free, but if you want to win an even bigger cash prize, enter a paid pitch to up the ante. My favorite thing about Spitch is the way points are allocated is much more interesting, giving you points for interceptions, passes, tackles and much more, meaning it's not just about goals and assists, making it much more tactical. So check out Spitch through the link in the description below. So from the goal kick, when possible, we did see Spurs shift to a back four, with Dyer and Romero dropping alongside the keeper whilst Davies pushed into the left back position. And United were looking to be aggressive in their positioning, with Rashford ready to pick up one centre forward, whilst Antony from the right hand side would take up this position, where he could initially cover the fullback before pushing up onto the centre back. Fernandes would initially cover Bissouma, but Spurs would look to switch to a double pivot in order to outnumber him. As the midfield was basically man-to-man, United could also look to counter this, with Casemiro tending deeper, allowing Fernandes to pick up one man, and Fred would initially start deeper, tempting the goalkeeper into the pass before springing onto Bissouma. And all of this would make central play much more difficult. So this was the initial United positioning, with Antony ready to cover Davies as well as ready to press Dyer, whilst Rashford is ready to pick up Romero. And initially, Fernandes looks like he's 2 versus 1 down against the double pivot. As soon as the ball becomes active, Rashford is now on one centre back and Antony on the other. And where Bissouma was initially free, we can see that Fred is ready to press. And this almost leads to a turnover. But there were still dangers associated with this for United. With Davies now at left back, Perisic could push up, forcing Dalot to remain deeper. So if Antony was too early to press Dyer, Davies could now be found in space and look to drive higher up the pitch, causing somewhat of an overload if they were quick enough on the outside. So here we can see that Antony has come in narrow quite early onto Dyer, meaning that Davies out here has space. So Loris is able to find him and he has room in which to push up. He can then find the dropping Kane, and as we can see, Perisic had been tying up Dalot so that he could impress Davies. Kane is then able to pull off the switch, ending up in a shot. And in open play, we saw similar situations with United being willing to be much more proactive when defending. This meant that when Spurs had a back three, the United wingers were willing to come much narrower in order to create a 3 versus 3 in this situation. As discussed, the midfield would be man-to-man, and maybe importantly, Ten Hag put faith in his 2 centre-backs to cover the 2 Spurs forwards, which would give Dalot and Shaw a little bit more freedom to anticipate the wide pass at times. So this was a brave move from Ten Hag, looking like a man-to-man system at times. So, in this situation, Spurs are in their back 3, and defensively, for the most part, United were lining up in a 4-1-4-1. So in open play situations, Antony and Sancho could then look to be more aggressive on the wider centre-backs. And this man-to-man situation could cause problems for United, because as we can see, Casemiro has been drawn over to this side of the pitch, meaning that the man is free here, and he is found round the corner. But again, one of the keys to this system working for Ten Hag was Varane and Martinez being highly aggressive. In build-up phases, we would often see Spurs shift to a 2, with Bissouma and Højbjerg being the double pivot, whilst Betancourt would push higher up. Again, with the man-to-man situation, Fernandes and Fred were the more aggressive of the midfielders, pushing straight onto their men, whilst Casemiro had the role of sweeping up depending on where Betancourt looked to move. This would create space that Spurs time and again looked to take advantage of, either by Højbjerg running off the blind side of his man, or more commonly either Kane or Son dropping in. And importantly, when they did, both Varane and Martinez were willing to follow their man deep, ensuring that they never had the space to turn. Again, this takes a lot of faith in your centre-back to be man-to-man. So here we see that Fernandes and Fred are again being aggressive on the double pivot, whilst Betancourt has moved higher up, and initially Casemiro is drawn towards him. This leaves a big space in the midfield. So we see both Højbjerg and Son are looking to move into that space. But Varane is already looking to move deep with Son so that he can't turn. But this is one of the rare occasions where Spurs were actually able to get past this press, so now Højbjerg has options, with Perisic on the outside as well as Kane and Son looking to make up the ground. And here's the alternative situation with Højbjerg, as again, Fred and Fernandes are being more aggressive, and Højbjerg moves into that space. And this time it is Casemiro who is willing to follow it up in order to maintain the man-to-man situation. And it's also important to note that on occasion United could look a little bit vulnerable out wide. And this is particularly because both Antony and Sancho could be caught high up when they were pressing the back three. So if Spurs were able to work the ball quickly, it will potentially allow Doherty or Perisic into a good position out wide. And higher up, Spurs did at times struggle to progress. So with less passing ability from deep, we would often see Højbjerg look to drop in and receive the ball to be the man to begin the progression. But the problem with this is either Davies could invert into the midfield, or he could go wide and find Perisic dropping in. But either way, neither of these men is the most comfortable in these central regions, so this wouldn't be the most effective play. And at times, we did see Spurs look to make this into more of a back four, much like they did on goal kicks at times. However, the problem with this is when there was a turnover, they were now much more vulnerable to runs in behind from the likes of Sancho, Rashford and Antony. And this is just a brief example of that, as Davies had been caught high in a more inverted position. So, United can look for the quick switch into Rashford, making the run into the space vacated. So in the second half, we did see Conte look to adapt. This current shape means man-to-man situations in the front line as well as in the midfield. So Conte looked to take a risk by pushing Betancourt up into the front line as well, and moving Son into the left half space, so that now there would be a 5 versus 4, and they could look to potentially overwhelm the backline with quick passes, and this did look like it could lead to something on occasion, which makes you question why Conte didn't bring on a more natural attacker in this position earlier during the match. So here we see the initial positioning of Betancourt, and with Varane and Martinez being man-to-man, he can look to make the run in between the defenders, as Doherty is also wide. This leads to him receiving the long ball and laying it off for Kane to run onto, leading to a decent chance. But overall, the scoreline may only be 2-0, but United's composure and clear tactical planning and execution means that Ten Hag earns a 9 out of 10 for the tactical score. Conte, on the other hand, never adapted really, despite the pattern of the game being laid out, so he only earns a 4. But drop your ratings down below.
But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.